Hi everyone, here I'm back. I'm gonna do another top 11 records video. The previous video I did was a top 11 progressive rock records from my collection. I didn't include progressive metal in that video because I was gonna do a separate video, and this is that separate video. So this is my top 11 progressive metal albums in my collection that I own. It's very important because there are a lot of records I really like and I did not include on my list because I didn't own their records. Also, a few of these albums may raise an eyebrow. Some of you might not consider them to be a progressive metal, but I think they still deserve to be on this list because I think they're flirting with progressive metal, or they're kind of progressive metal, or in my opinion they are progressive metal. So, and it's my list, so I can include whatever I want. So let's get started. Number 11, Anathema or Anathema, with their album A Fine Day to Exit. A really cool band. This is a really cool album. They made a lot of albums, and their later albums are not the same as their first albums. Their first albums are more flirting with death metal, more darker tones, and their later albums are more, how do I say, more softer, more positive, more spiritually themed. This album is, I think, somewhere in the middle. It's from 2001. It still has this very dark, depressing tone. I chose this album because it was the first album I bought from Anathema, and I have a real nostalgic feel for this album. Every time I put it on, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot how great this album was. So you should check it out, Anathema or Anathema, with A Fine Day to Exit as my number 11. My number 10 is Pain of Salvation with the album B. In the progressive metal world, it's a pretty famous band. They release a lot of albums. I don't like all of their albums. I especially don't like their latest albums. But there are two albums in their catalog I really like, and one of them is this. It's one of my favorites, BE. It's a very good album, very inventive. The themes are very inspirational. It has very good songs on it. It's a very technical album. If you like technical music, this is really cool to listen to. It also has a very ambient vibe. You should really check it out. BE from Pain of Salvation. I think this album was released in 2004. So this is my number 10. This is a bit stupid. I feel I had to include this band in my top 11 progressive metal albums, but I don't have any of their records on vinyl. They're very hard to find, and when they came out I didn't collect vinyl yet, and I didn't do a lot of reissues, and they're very expensive to find, the old pressings. So I am including this CD. It's a bit stupid, but I had to, because it's Dream Theater. It's, of course, it's Dream Theater. What's more progressive metal than Dream Theater? I used to like them a lot until Mike Portnoy left, and then I didn't care so much anymore. But this is a really good album. 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. It's a really good progressive metal album. You should really check it out. This is my number 9. My number 8, Arian, with the album Into the Electric Castle. This is a Dutch composer who makes metal operas, really. They're rock operas or metal operas, but you can classify them under progressive rock. They are classified that way when you search them on the internet. When I was 16 years and really, for the first time, heard this album, I was really like, oh my god, I've never heard this before. There's an entire story locked around this album. If you try to follow it, it's like stepping into a movie. There are a lot of characters who are portrayed by singers, different singers from different bands. Instrumentally, this is a really, really, really good album. When I grew older, I grew out of this genre of music. I don't know. When I grew older, I found it to be a little kitschy. But when I was younger, I was really, really, really into it. This was one of my favorite records at that time. So this is my, this is my number 8. Arian Into the Electric Castle. Really, really good album. You should check it out. My number 7. Tool. Of course, I had to include Tool. How do I explain Tool's music? I don't know if I have to explain. You have to listen to it. I don't like all the records. I think they made 2 masterpieces. The last one they made and this one. This one is Lateralis. Tool really is, it's progressive metal, but it stands on its own. There's no band that sounds like Tool. You have to really appreciate Tool for what Tool is. So I don't think I have to explain, you just have to listen to this album, Lateralis, as my number 7. Wait a minute, I think I got confused. Am I 11, 10, 9, 8, 7? Yes, this is my 7. Next one. Metallica, Master of Puppets. Yeah, I know. Most of you wouldn't classify this as progressive metal, but I think it has enough flirtation with the progressive side of music that I can put it on this list. I think it's their best album. Metallica, their early albums are like thrash metal, but this is like a tipping point, I think. This has a lot of melodic stuff on it, a lot of classical influences. It's also more about the composition than the previous albums. The previous albums were more about the energy. This album is really about the composition, and that's what it makes progressive metal to me. So I think for me, this is somewhere between metal and progressive metal, but I wanted to include it on this list. I really like this album. It's one of my favorite albums. On number 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, number 6, Metallica, Master of Puppets. Next one, Crack the Sky from Mastodon. You know what Metallica did? Mastodon pushed even further. This is a really, really great album. I love Mastodon, and I think this is their epos. This is their best album. It's very progressive. It's very innovative guitar parts. It has a conceptual story behind it, which is very inspirational. Really, really good album. It really backs a punch. It's real metal, but it's real progressive. So this is my number 5, Mastodon, Crack the Sky. My number 4. Yeah, Black Sabbath, with their debut album Black Sabbath from 1969. I consider to be this the first metal album. So in that sense, it was very progressive in the literal sense. It inspired an entire genre. It's very good. The first 4 albums of Black Sabbath are masterpieces, in my opinion. I included it on this list because I think it's progressive metal to me. You can say it's progressive rock, but it's the birth of a new genre called metal. So I think it's progressive metal to me. Very, very good album. Their debut, Black Sabbath. on number 4. Number 3, Wasteland, from the band Riverside. It's a Polish band. I've been a fan of them for years. It's progressive rock, progressive metal, has a lot of influences. This is their latest album, and it's a really progressive metal album. It's really heavy at some parts. It's really innovative. It's really virtuosic guitar playing on there. Here, the instrumentation is really, really good. And there's a concept behind this story, behind this album. So it's a concept album, what makes it progressive, of course. You should really, really check this album out. It has a song on it called The Struggle for Survival. It's about 10 minutes long. It's really, really great. Really dig this album. This is my number 3, Riverside, Wasteland. My number 2, Devin Townsend Project. Talked about Devin Townsend a lot, I think, in my older videos. Really, really love Devin Townsend, so I had to include it on my list. He came from a band called Strapping Young Lad, which was more like really heavy thrash death metal. This is not like that at all. This is, it has a lot of influences, like ambient stuff, metal stuff, rock stuff. It's really, really good. I consider this to be progressive metal, so I put it on this list. It's one of my favorite artists. This is the first album I heard from him, and I was like, oh my god, this is really, really good. So I had to include it on my list, and it's high up my list. It's number 2 on my list. Key, from Devin Townsend Project. Now my number 1, this was not easy, because there are 2 records from this band, of this band I really like, and that's this one, Blackwater Park, and the album Ghost Reveries. Ghost Reveries is my favorite album because it has more nostalgia for me, but I think all considered this is their best album. Their earlier albums were really progressive metal. They took things from the genre of black metal and death metal and really fused it together with progressive rock and jazz and things like that. So it's a very, very cool mix. The later albums are more progressive rock. They deviated away from the metal thing, but this is from their era when they were really heavy. This is a really heavy band. It's really heavy at parts, and sometimes it's really melodic and beautiful and distant and melancholic. But this is a masterpiece. Songs like The Drapery Falls, The Leper Infinity. You really should, if you want to listen to this album, if you've never heard this before, Blackwater Park from Opeth, you should listen it all the way through. It's like, for me, it's like A Dark Side of the Moon from Pink Floyd. You have to listen to the entire album. It will take you on a journey. This is a rough journey. This is bleak. This is dark. But it's really, really, really good. In my opinion, one of the best progressive metal albums ever made. You should check it out. Blackwater Park by Opeth. This was my top 11 progressive metal records I own. Hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you will check it out someday or check the music out. Have a nice day.